I have a lot of questions. Just how deep can the Ducks' running back room be in 2025? What is success for Oregon in the upcoming season? Is Dante Moore being overhyped or disrespected? Which are the biggest priority recruitments for the Green and Yellow following this weekend's commitment of five-star defensive lineman Richard Wesley? I'm going to attempt to provide some clarity. I'm going to attempt to provide some answers on these and more questions on a jam-packed edition of That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LaRue. I have been waiting very patiently to use this phrase on an edition of TSOW. You hear it at the beginning of every edition of TSOW. Maybe I've been using it a little bit too liberally over on Twitter. Maybe it really deserves to be saved for big moments and big news like this, and for big splashes made by Dan Lanning like this.
Oh, didn't see you there. Well, all the schools, they all show me, types of love, but there's one school, show me the most love, and, I guess that's where I'm going. You ready, Coach?
Let's get it.
Whoa. It's time, baby. Let's go.
For those of you on podcast, or maybe for those of you living under a rock this weekend, that was the commitment video, the commitment announcement of On3 industry five-star defensive lineman Richard Wesley pledging to Oregon. This is the first commitment for Oregon. You got since February 26th. You got to go back nearly 3 months to when we saw high 3-star, low 4-star defensive back Xavier Larice. We know all about the storylines that have happened this spring, from decommitments to losing out on some recruiting battles. So it is certainly good to get a commitment, and this is a big one. Richard Wesley had been on 3 RPM predicted to land at Oregon about a week or 2 weeks ago, and Oregon certainly seemed to be in the lead and be in a really good spot. Richard Wesley was on campus this weekend for the scavenger hunt. I thought eventually that we would get a commitment from Richard. I wasn't really anticipating this weekend. So this was certainly welcome news on Saturday night. Now, here's the deal in the fallout. We saw Rivals have a write-up on this. Steve Wiltfong over at On3 had a write-up on this. And it's worth noting that it sounds like Richard, his family, his dad, his camp is saying, hey, this is great. Okay, Richard making this decision. But we're still going to go out there. We're going to take our visits. We're still going to go out there and take our officials. It's being reported that Texas was kind of the team that was closest right now on Richard Wesley. So I feel very confident that when pen meets paper in December, that Richard Wesley will be a Duck. But it's worth noting that that's kind of the story coming out of the Wesley camp right now. Let's dive in to Richard himself. I want to talk about really his body of work. I want to talk about his talent. I want to talk about his future. And I want to talk about how it really blends into the future of this defensive line right now for Oregon. First thing that I want to say, he's very advanced for his age in more ways than one. 6'5", 255 pounds. That's great for a kid in the 2026 class. But remember, this is a reclassification from the 2027 class. He was one of the top-ranked edge rushers coming out of 2027. It's a really deep edge class this year in 2026, led by Zion Ely out there on the East Coast. But he's doing this at 16 years old. So you're looking at that frame at 6'5", 255. There's, I think, a lot of work that can certainly be done. When you look at Richard coming out of Sierra Canyon and you watch his film, I think he certainly blends into that defensive end position in Tosh Lapoi's defense. Because, you kind of look, you got two different players, I think, coming off the edge, that Jordan Birch position, that what is now going to be the Mateo Uyunglele position. The other side maybe works a little bit more as a linebacker type of position. But on a lot of the tape from Richard Wesley, he's got his hand on the ground. A lot of times he's got two hands on the ground really coming after the quarterback. So considering his young age, I think that he can certainly get to 265, 270, maybe even 275 by the time his potential Oregon career comes to an end. 9 sacks, 16 tackles for loss at Sierra Canyon last season. He's the number 25 overall player according to the On3 industry, and he is a 5-star, a consensus top 50 player. Rivals is really high on him. Rivals has him as a top 10 overall player in 26 at the number 9 position. When you look at his film, he's very explosive. Very explosive, especially when you combine it with that size. That's a dangerous combination coming off the edge. And he's got good hands. Like, we once again, we're going to come back to the age on this thing. He's very developed for his age. And I'm very curious to see how much of a jump that he's going to be able to make in his, it's not his senior year, it's his junior year, his final year over there at Sierra Canyon, to see how much better he can certainly get, how much higher that he can jump. By the time we get to December, when all is said and done, I think he's one of the best edge rushers in this entire class, to be brutally honest with you. He does a really good job staying at home. He does a really good job at staying with the play. For his age, I think he's very disciplined as well. So in many different ways, I think he's very advanced, despite being a 16-year-old kid. What did you look like when you were 16? Sure wasn't 6'5", 255 and could explode off the football. This is like one thing of him coming here in a phone booth, but when you kind of expand on it a little bit, Oregon is creating a little bit of a reputation at that edge position. Now, pre-Dan Lanning, you go back to Kayvon Thibodeau. And a lot of people are saying, a lot of industry experts are saying, he's the best since Kayvon at the edge position in Southern California, right? So that's big-time praise for a guy like Richard Wesley. But then you get in the Lanning era. You look what Jordan Birch was able to do coming over from South Carolina. He produced his best seasons at Oregon. 11.5 sacks, 19 tackles for loss in the last 2 seasons. So that's that transfer development that we've talked about on previous editions of TSOW. And then Mateo Uyunglele. Okay, he came out of St. John Bosco. People are looking at Richard Wesley saying, hey, he's the best guy since Kayvon to come out of Southern California. Mateo's saying, hey, I did pretty good, certainly for myself as well. I was a pretty high recruit coming out of high school as well. But you look at what Mateo did last year, leading the Big Ten in sacks, first team all Big Ten. They recruited, I think he was a top 10 overall edge rusher. You look at Elijah Rushing from a couple of classes ago. Like, all of a sudden now you're starting to stack some guys. And really develop this reputation where elite-level pass rushers can come to Oregon and develop into high-level draft picks as well. Now, where exactly does Richard blend in within this 2026 defensive line? I look at the 2 other commitments on the defensive line, and it fits perfectly. Because when you look at Oregon's D-line, the 3 guys, defensive end, nose tackle, and defensive tackle, Oregon really has a nose tackle and a defensive tackle already committed in this class. Viliami Molawa, 6'3", 300 pounds. He really showed out this weekend at an Under Armour camp in Salt Lake City, Utah, and he earned himself an Under Armour All-American Bowl spot. Max Torres from Scoop Duck at On3 was out there, and he said, hey, man, this guy should have maybe been the defensive MVP. He really proved, I think there's a lot of smoke right now around Viliami Molawa that he could really be, when all is said and done in his final year at Willamette this upcoming season, he could be a consensus 4-star across the board. I think he's going to be a guy, I don't know if I'd really call it a late bloomer, but he's a guy that can really spring on late and really rise up these rankings his senior year over there playing high school football in Eugene, Oregon. And then you look at Tony Cumberland, 6'5", 285 pounds. He's a little bit more athletic, but extremely powerful. he's kind of in that mold of that defensive tackle type of position. I think he's a little bit taller, but maybe a little bit of a similar style of maybe someone like you'll see out of Bear Alexander coming up this season, where he can just overpower some dudes, but he can also be athletic and play different techniques up front of the defensive line. Now, remember, Matthew Johnson, Toby Hastrup also came in. Those were two edge rushers in last year's defensive line class as well. So after you see guys like Blake Purchase and Elijah Rushing and Mateo Uyunglele and some of these guys in this current crop of pass rushers, these guys, the Richard Wesleys, the Johnsons, the Hastrups, Tony Cumberlands, maybe from the interior perspective, this is going to be your next group of pass rushers. And to be honest with you, yeah, I like it. I really like this group of pass rushers right now. I know that people were a little bit down maybe on defensive line recruiting following the decommitment and flip of Tamahini Tupoi, but with the addition of Richard Wesley, I really like what's shaping up in Eugene right now. Following Wesley's commitment over the weekend to the Ducks, Oregon has now vaulted themselves back into the top 5 of the On3 recruiting rankings, certainly taking steps up the ladder on other industry recruiting rankings out there. Is this Richard Wesley commitment the official kickoff to the summer of Dan that we talked about on last week's show? We know historically, this is the time where the Ducks really start to take over, really start to make a lot more noise on the recruiting trail. I think looking back to some of these pushes in the spring for some of these really high-profile recruits. We talk about Caden Dixon-White committing to Ohio State over Oregon, Jared Curtis recommitting to Georgia. I certainly don't think that the Ducks are going to be able to land Jackson Cantwell. I think they knew, hey, let's swing high. Let's see what happens if we miss. In some cases, we've got 5-star backup plans, and that leads me to my summer recruiting board for Oregon. My top 5 priority recruitments for the Ducks that I believe that they'll have at the top of their board as we approach the summer months, as we approach official visit season. There's one option at number 1. There's one guy at the top of the board. It's one of the top overall players in the country this year. It's Emmanuel Ahinacho, the offensive tackle coming out of Georgetown Prep over there on the East Coast at Baltimore, Maryland. How about 6'6", 345 pounds? This is an elite offensive line class. And I think it's been clear since the beginning that the Ducks want to take advantage of this elite offensive line class. When I look at how the Ducks have been really building their lines up front, they need to continue to build through the recruiting ranks, because look at what happened from last year's offensive line. Now you only have one guy coming back, Poncho, in the middle at center. And then if you look at Isaiah World, you look at Emmanuel Pranon, you look at Alex Harkey, you look at a lot of these guys, they're going to be gone next year. There's the potential we could have another 4 offensive line starters move on, and now all of a sudden you're kind of sitting there yet again in a hole where it's all right, now what do we do up front on the offensive line? That kind of brings me back to last year's offensive line class. I thought last year's was pretty good. They had some top 100, top 150, 4-star type of guys that I think are solid, that I think with some years of development could work their way into the starting lineup. But they need to start recruiting at an elite level like they have at some other positions. And you've seen what other positions have been able to do, certainly under Dan Lanning. So I think that's where Emmanuel Ahinacho really slides in, is really continuing to develop that so you have multi-year starters. So you're not constantly taking 3 guys out of the portal, 4 guys out of the portal, and the reality of the situation is you're not going to be able to get guys as talented as Isaiah World every single year. There's a reason why Miami offered $2 million, offering $2 million to Jackson Cantwell. These are very valuable positions. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, those guys are a dime a dozen. You can go out and get those guys. No question about it. No question about it. But you need to certainly ensure your future at the left tackle position with a guy like Emmanuel Ahinacho. He holds Oregon's final visit right now. I think that's going to be June 20th through the 22nd, and then he's set to commit in early August. So Oregon certainly knows what they have to target, and I think you're going to see a lot of Nacho. You're going to see a lot of Oregon steam right now. Oregon is the leader for Emmanuel Ahi-Nacho right now. So let's hope that they can seal the deal, because losing out on Cody Green, likely losing out on Jackson Cantwell, if you lose out on Nacho, that's not where you want to be. You're kind of, once again, in that similar type of situation on the offensive line. So if you see a talent as talented as this guy, you want to take advantage. You want to be able to close the deal. Let's hope that Dan can do that. At number 2 is the guy that Emmanuel Ahi-Nacho is hopefully going to be protecting at Oregon, and that being quarterback Ryder Lyons. So we know Jonas Williams, even going back to Jaron Kavawe, Sagapulatele, like we know what Jared Curtis, we know what's gone down at the quarterback position. Now, there is an on-3 RPM prediction from 2 on-3 analysts, Steve Wiltfong and Pete Nakos, for Ryder Lyons to end up at Oregon. I feel really good. They've always been in the hunt. It looked like USC had the lead early. Now it's Oregon. Now it's BYU that are really in the hunt right now. And they need to ensure, I think, their quarterback future. And this, I think, really ensures that down the line. We know he's more of a 27 kid because of the LDS mission. But this quarterback room is stacked up right now. With Dante Moore, with Austin Novosad, you could even throw like Luke Moga, and who knows what Achilles Smith Jr. could develop into out there as well. But I think a top quarterback can really help you out, even long-term, looking forward to December in this recruiting class as well. Like we see what Jared Curtis is doing to say, yeah, I'm going to get on the trail. He met up with Jackson Cantwell at his Georgia visit this last weekend. I think Ryder Lyons can be, now, I think him being a 27 guy makes it a little bit different, but certainly not too much different. I think having a commitment from a quarterback earlier on in the cycle can certainly help you. That's why it was helping Oregon with Jonas Williams early on. But I think having a commitment here from Ryder Lyons sooner rather than later could really help the Ducks, certainly down the road. And I refreshed my memory a little bit in watching his film. And yeah, I remembered why I like this guy so much and why I really didn't think there was a huge gap between him and Jared Curtis. So the quarterback is certainly something, like you've seen it with offensive tackle, and you've seen like where Oregon had commitments and where they were pushing their resources and where they were really trying to invest a lot of time and money into some of these recruitments. I think they're looking to do that at quarterback. They want to find a high school recruited quarterback that they can develop that can be the future of the program. We don't know if that's going to be Achilles Smith Jr., like a 4-star top 150 guy. Last year, you look at Ryder Lyons, and yeah, the film tells you that he can certainly be a future starting signal caller, maybe for multiple years for the Ducks in the near future. So you got about 3 years to fill between now and Ryder. It'll be interesting to see how those puzzle pieces move, but certainly because of Jared Curtis falling through, Oregon's going to be all in, certainly on Ryder Lyons. Now, this is where things get a little bit fun. This is where things, I think, can go in a lot of different directions. I think it's been clear since the start that Oregon has wanted to get 2 high-level offensive tackles in this class. Talked about Nacho as the number 1. I've got Kelvin Obot now as the number 3. He's in, Oregon is in his final 5, his top 5 right now, coming out of Fruitland, Idaho. When you look at Kelvin, he's a very athletic and a very explosive tackle at 6'6", 300 pounds. It's really hard to evaluate some of these kids sometimes, especially at this level. Like, these football fields out in Idaho, I mean, they don't got a whole lot of fans out there. Some of the guys that Kelvin is just demolishing into the turf are, they're going to be accountants in a couple of years. I mean, let's call it as it is. These guys aren't going to be playing college football. So sometimes that can make it a little bit tough to evaluate. But I think Kelvin's got a really high ceiling. I really do out there. On3 has him ranked as the number 9 overall prospect. And what maybe started with like Cody Green and Jackson Cantwell and Jared Curtis now could pivot to something like Ryder Lyons, Emmanuel Ahinacho, and Kelvin Obot. That's a pretty damn good pivot. I think that's like, if you want to take anything away from this like recruiting cycle so far, is that Oregon has as good a backup and fallback options as anybody. There's a world where, would you rather have Cody Green than Kelvin Obot? Yeah, you probably would. But there's a world where maybe down the line, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, that these guys are just 2-year stalwarts on this Oregon offensive line and are doing a great job. And who knows what Obot can really develop into. He puts like an extra 10 pounds, 15 pounds on that frame. He's sitting at 6'6", 300 pounds right now. He could be a dominant offensive tackle. I really see that, and I really believe that. I think that this Oregon coaching staff is going to go hard. They're going to go hard after Kelvin Obot right now. I think that they are extremely motivated to get 2 high-level offensive tackles in this class, and I think they need to continue to raise the profile of recruiting at that position to kind of match what we've seen from other position groups. Number 4 on this list, I've got Brandon Arrington. Look, what a haul it was last year for the Ducks in the secondary. Trey McKnight safety, and they brought in not 1, not 2, but 3 corners. 3 elite-level corners in that class. I think they were all like top 75 kids last year. So I understand the room is pretty damn loaded. But Brandon Arrington's good. He's really good, and he fits all of the traits that you look for in a top-level corner. Elite speed, how about a 10-2-1 100-yard dash? Elite size and length, 6'2", 6'2.5", 180 pounds, and man, he's just got such a big radius. You see him on film, you see him play wide receiver, you see him return kicks, you see that athleticism, that true and elite athleticism that you see from a guy like this. I'm going to talk about next week about how big of another haul there could be for Oregon in the secondary. And Brandon Arrington is certainly that guy that I think this staff is really going to put a priority into, because, man, could you imagine? Close your eyes and imagine this sweet sight. Naeem Offord on one side, Brandon Arrington on the other side. No disrespect to Dorian Brew, no disrespect to Brandon Finney, but, man, those are some elite traits. Those are some elite guys over there at the corner position. Oregon holds the final visit on June 20th for Brandon before a July 5th commitment date. So you're going to have Nacho and Arrington on campus there in late June. Consensus top 30 player, On3 industry 5-star, and number 13 in those On3 industry rankings. I know the room's a little bit crowded, but Brandon could certainly stand out and be one of the best in this like potential 2-year haul for the Ducks back there in the secondary. Let's finish up at the wide receiver position, and let's talk about Messiah Hampton, 4-star wide receiver out of Rochester, New York. Now, there might be some other receivers that might be more talented guys. Calvin Russell coming out of Florida might be more talented. Jalen Lott, right, in a big-time recruiting battle the Ducks are with Texas, and that's going to be hard to hold off the horns down there in the Lone Star State. And both those guys might be better players. But I think you need to let Ross Douglas cook right here. There is recruiting is all about relationships, certainly sometime. And Ross Douglas has a great relationship with Messiah Hampton, who was one of the biggest risers in the latest On300 rankings. Like, On3 has him as a top 50 overall player. I said this when things didn't work out with the Caden Dixon-Wyatt commitment. I said, okay, yeah, maybe it stinks a little bit that you didn't get the wide receiver out of Mater Dei, but guys like Messiah Hampton and others are in the ballpark. Like, in some cases, they're ranked higher than KDW was. So I think that's a reason why I still have a lot of confidence in this wide receiver position, but I really want to really focus in on and dial in on that relationship that Ross Douglas built when he recruited Hampton when he was at Syracuse, and now he was the first offer that Ross Douglas extended was to Hampton when he became the wide receivers coach at Oregon. I've said this on previous shows. You bring in Gatlin Bear, you bring in Messiah Hampton, even if that's all you bring in this 2026 class, that's good. That's really good. and the future remains bright. I think Hampton is the best chance for an Oregon commitment right now. A lot of industry experts say that the Ducks lead for Hampton services. He's going to have an official visit on June 6th. He visited this last weekend during the scavenger hunt. USC, Ohio State, Miami, and Penn State. He's been to Penn State a bunch of times. Also have official visits in as well. So, hey, let Ross cook a little bit right now. But these are priority recruitments that I think are going to set the stage for some potential commitments in this potential Summer of Dan. Man, there really is a lot of interesting thoughts around Dante Moore. There's a lot of interesting talk surrounding Dante Moore this offseason. Like, there is a group of people, I think there's a group of people within the Oregon fan base that's saying, well, should we pump the brakes a little bit? I know we're optimistic and we know we're excited about the talent he is, but is he being overhyped a little bit? People are talking about Heisman when they're talking about Dante Moore. And then you have, on the other side, there is maybe a little bit of disrespect being floated out there as concerned with Dante Moore. For example, on the latter, you have Bud Elliott and Smoke Dixon of CBS Sports and 24/7 that recently put out their top 5 Big Ten quarterbacks. Smoke had a true freshman from Maryland by the name of Malik Washington, who I don't know how many games he's going to play this year even. Bryce Underwood, another true freshman, ahead of Dante Moore on his list. You go to the other side with Bud, and he had Damon Williams from Washington all the way up at number 2. Do I think Damon's going to be a really good quarterback? Yeah, I do. Do I think he's going to be number 2 in the Big Ten? I'm not so sure, especially as we're sitting here in the month of May looking forward at things right now. I think when you look at the disrespect specifically of Dante Moore and maybe the hesitation of some folks of Dante Moore, I think it's because of what's on film over there at UCLA. Here's what I want to say about his time over there at UCLA. First of all, when you play a true freshman at quarterback, especially in today's day and age of college football in the Big Ten of the SEC, I know that was the last year of the Pac-12 when he started over there. It's not going to be a glowing success right away, no matter what happens when you start a freshman quarterback. Not only that, but if you start a freshman quarterback in a scheme that doesn't really fit him, and that's what was going on with Chip Kelly over there, I think they wanted him to be somebody else than I think what really fit his skill set best. They kind of wanted Dante to mold into Chip, and Chip really needed to mold into Dante. I think that was really kind of part of what happened over there at UCLA. And then you put him behind a bad offensive line. Dante got sacked 16 times in 9 games, and the Bruins offensive line allowed 42 sacks that season. That was 122nd in college football. So you put that all together and you put it in the oven, and I think you just get a bad situation. And I think at times during that UCLA season, where Dante Moore played, 4 or 5 games in total, where it was quarterback musical chairs there for a little bit. When you put him in there to start the season and then you pull him out there, that doesn't, and then you put him back in a little bit later on, that doesn't exactly do a lot of confidence. I think Chip was kind of staring at a problem in the face at that point for UCLA. It'd be like, all right, do I want to win a little bit more games right now? Or do I want to see Dante kind of work some of these things out, work out the kinks, and start to develop a little bit? He chose, I want to win some football games. Because as we know now, he was not invested as being the head coach at UCLA very long term. To be honest with you, I think it's really hard to evaluate Dante, and I think that some people are doing that, and it's a little unfair, but I think it's really hard to evaluate Dante at UCLA because, frankly, I think we're going to see a completely different quarterback this year. I think him sitting and learning in this day and age of the portal, and in this day and age, in this generation of player where so many players want to get on the field right away, I think that was extremely mature of Dante because I think he could kind of see the end goal. And because of him sitting and learning behind Dylan Gabriel, learning in these quarterback meetings, learning from offensive coordinator Will Stein and this entire offensive coaching staff, he's going to be a much more mature quarterback. Now, I know he didn't get the experience of literally going onto the field, reading a defense, making good decisions, but absorbing what this Oregon offense is, and it's very, very different than what UCLA's offense is, I think is going to give him a better chance at success when he steps onto the field this year in 2025 for the Oregon Ducks. Now, I think a big reason, going back to the other side of the coin, where it's like, hey, maybe this guy's being overhyped a little bit, is because of the system he's going into. And where I find confidence is within the system. Like, I see Dante and I see his talent, and that's great. But when I look at what Will Stein does with quarterbacks and what he puts on the plate of quarterbacks and the weapons that are in this Oregon offense, that's what excites me the most. That's, I think, what should excite you the most. And I think that's where, when you kind of venture into, like, Joel Klatt has him as a dark horse Heisman candidate. He said it during his post-spring edition of the Joel Klatt Show. Like, I think that's a big reason what people look into. They look at the system. They look at the weapons with, like, Evan Stewart to throw the ball to. The speed that he has. You look at Decorian Moore, Superfrost. You look at Kenyon Sadiq. Like, you look at all of these guys to throw the football to. I could throw for 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns when I'm throwing the ball to 18, when I'm throwing the ball to Dak, when I'm throwing the ball to East 2 on the outside. Like, and then I want to talk about the system now at Oregon. Will Stein preaches a very protect the ball type of offense. Short passes, get it to your playmakers in space. Efficiency is something that's been preached a lot. I know something that we all want to see Dante do this season is unleash the deep ball, push it down the middle of the field, take it to a different level that that Dylan Gabriel was not able to do last year. I understand that. But part of the magic that is Oregon's offense is short passing game, medium passing game, and keep on moving the stick. So when you get a favorable matchup, you can then take advantage. That's what we saw a couple of years ago with Bo Nix in 2023. And now I want to talk about Bo, because I've really put a lot more thought into this lately. Is you look at the situation with Bo Nix at Auburn, you look at the situation with UCLA or with Dante Moore at UCLA. Now, they're not a complete copy and paste. Bo, I think, played, 3 years at Auburn. Dante Moore played 1 year, half a year, whatever you want to call it, over there at UCLA. There are some similarities, but there also are some differences. Like, Bo Nix did not sit out. Hey, Dante Moore sat out learning from this offense, learning from Dylan Gabriel, learning from Will Stein, as I said before. But I think Bo Nix really paved a path that Dante Moore can certainly run on. Like, you look at Bo, he threw 16 interceptions in 3 years down there on the Plains. He combined for 10 interceptions in 2 years at Oregon. It was very clear when he stepped into this room, like, he was a 5-star talent coming out of high school. When he stepped into this room, when he stepped into this system, when he stepped on foot at Autzen Stadium, it was very clear what his talent truly was. And it was very clear what Will Stein could certainly do with him. Now, Will Stein was 2023. Kenny Dillingham was 2022. But I see a similar type of trajectory for Dante. I talked about this a little bit over on last year's show. And this kind of goes into, okay, what can we realistically expect from Dante Moore? Because some people are overhyping him and saying Heisman. Some people are disrespecting him and saying, yeah, he's going to be a middle-of-the-road quarterback in the Big Ten. I don't know if either of those are true. Because I think the trajectory is more like Bo. I think we could see a similar type of 2-year plan for the Ducks working up to a fantastic 2026, because I think a lot of people believe that 2026 is the championship year for the Ducks. And 2025 as a team, hey, maybe they could do it. maybe they could break through. But I think realistic expectations are we see as far as Oregon standards are concerned, we see a really good to great season in 2025. Does he get to those Heisman finalist type of expectations? Maybe. But I don't think as fans we should say, well, Dante Moore should be a Heisman finalist because the last 2 years of Heisman of Oregon quarterbacks were. Well, Bo Nix was not a Heisman finalist in 2022. And I think that's the path. I think that's where we're trying to operate. I think in so many ways, Oregon is operating in not like a macro window, but maybe like a micro window of 2 years to be able to really maximize Dante's talent on campus and as well as Decorian Moore's talent as well. I think it's kind of a microcosm of this 2025 team of just how much youth there is on this team, how much inexperience as there is on this team. So is Dante Moore a quarterback that's outside in the Big Ten? No, he's not, because I feel like Oregon and Ohio State quarterbacks, just based on the systems that they're in, they should be like top 5 quarterbacks every year in the Big Ten. Maybe even top 5 quarterbacks in college football every single year, depending, of course, on how the talent looks like in that room. But should they be expected to be Heisman finalists and Heisman winners every year? No, probably not. Where are we gonna land? I think we're gonna land somewhere in between. And I think Dante Moore's trajectory is going to be a lot like this team's trajectory in certain seasons. They're young. Maybe these first couple of games, there's going to be some kinks that are going to be worked out. But your hope is that this thing is humming. This thing is running and gunning when you get to game 11, when you get to game 12, and then when you get in, hopefully, into the college football playoff. And then you can really see Dante slinging it like we know that he can sling it, and he's really starting to turn over into that elite level quarterback. So is he being disrespected? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Is he being overhyped? Also, yeah, maybe a little bit. Where will he realistically land? It always seems to be somewhere in the middle, doesn't it? Behind and to the side of the quarterbacks are the running backs. And this is where the questions continue on this show. Just how deep can this running back go in 2025? Just how deep will this running back room go in 2025? Well, this is something that running backs coach Rashad Samples brought up this spring, and, well, he might have an interesting solution to get all of these guys involved.
Go out there. I mean, you got so many dynamic runners that are dynamic for different reasons, lateral ability, and Jay Harris is explosive, and Jaden Lamar has long speed. And I mean, you can just go down the line with every single guy. There's different reasons why these guys can just rattle off 20, 30, 40-yard runs, and they're going to do it in all different ways. And they all kind of weirdly complement each other. It's probably one of the most talented running back rooms I've ever been a part of. I'm going to try to figure out if I can call the NCAA and see if we can play with 2 footballs. Yeah, we got to find ways to get these guys the ball, and that's my job, and it's a hard job. It's a good problem to have, right? It's to have a lot of good guys that you want to get the ball to in different ways. I think you can expect to see multiple guys playing.
I really love a lot of the points that Coach Samp made in that soundbite from earlier on this spring, and I think it gives us a lot to think about. Like Jaden Lamar and Jay Harris are 2 perfect examples. Because I think, and I'm guilty of this as well, I think when we think of this running back room for 2025, a lot of people have thrown up Makhi Hughes. I think we're all pretty much in agreement. He's going to be the number 1 running back. He's transferring in to fill that void that is left by Jordan James. And, this is not an insult, I think, to Noah Whittington, but I just don't know if Noah Whittington is the guy that's going to elevate himself into that number 1 role. I've said it many times over. I think Noah Whittington is a perfect 1B back. I think Noah Whittington is that perfect complement. We've seen it earlier on in his career, and we saw it last year certainly as well. But how deep can they go, and how deep will they go, I think are 2 different conversations. You throw out the true freshmen. You throw out Jordan Davison, and you throw out De'Aaron Hill. You look at the rest of this running back room, which is 5 guys. I think all 5 of these guys can have a role on this football team this season. I'm not sure if there will be as much consistent depth, but I think there's going to be a lot more situational depth. So when you look at consistent depth, it's like, hey, are you going to have 4 guys rush for 500 or 600 yards? No, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, you have a guy transferring in Makhi Hughes, and this is very interesting to really see, because Makhi rushed for, on average, 1,400 yards over the last 2 seasons. Now, that's at the group of 5 level. And the whole point of this segment is evaluating the depth in the running back room. Is he going to be able to rush for 1,400 yards? I think there is going to be so much depth in the room, and I think there's going to be a lot of carries to go around. I'm not sure if Makhi is going to rush for that 1,400 yards. I think we're going to see a Noah Whittington season, much like we've seen a Noah Whittington season in the past at Oregon, when he has been healthy. Like, when I look at all of these guys in the spring game, Noah Whittington, there was, I think, sometime in the middle of the game, like, he showed some pretty good burst throughout that spring game as well. Like, I'm really excited about what he can provide. But I think when it comes to consistent, like when we talk about consistent depth, who are we going to see on a consistent basis? I think Makhi is certainly going to be that number 1 guy. Like, Makhi and Noah are very point A to point B type of runners. They can smash your face in. They can run you over. I think that's the type of run game that you're going to see from atop of this Oregon depth chart. Because you look at the interior of this offensive line, when you look at Poncho and Pranon and whoever it is at the other guard, like, this is going to be a group, I think, that's really good. I think this is a better interior offensive line than we've seen in recent years at Oregon, and I think that's going to help with the interior run game combined with the guys that want to smash your face in, like I was just talking about. So I feel very confident in that type of role where Makhi is like subbing in for Jordan James. He's going to rush around that 1,000 yard mark, and James is going to do his 600 yards, his 700 yards, 500, whatever it ends up being. Now I think after that is where things get a little bit interesting, because a lot of people, including myself, have really hyped up Dink Riggs. Dink Riggs, I think, provides a little bit more shiftiness, a little bit more speed to the outside than the more experienced guys in Hughes and Whittington. But I think where things get really interesting beyond that is the guys that Coach Sam talked about in Jaden Lamar and Jay Harris. I said during the spring, I thought one of these guys might transfer out just because of the depth. But I'm really glad that both of these guys are here. Let's talk about Jaden Lamar first, because we saw it in the spring game with his burst on that first touchdown drive where he was able to burst up the middle and have a nice score. He's very clear that he has that burst, he has that pop, he has that explosiveness. It would not surprise me to, like last year's game against Oregon State, I think they threw it out to him on a screen pass, and he was able to put that speed on display and run away from the Beaver defense for a touchdown. It would not surprise me if they get very creative with Jaden Lamar and try to just isolate his speed in any way they can, whether it's traditional stuff in the backfield, whether it's isolating him out on the perimeter. I think, like, I see that speed, and you want to get that long breakaway speed on the field somehow, in some way, in some type of packages. When I look at Jay Harris, now Jay Harris is maybe he's in the mold of maybe some of those top 2 guys that we talked about. But when I look at Jay, and I remember flashing back to the spring game, remember that touchdown that he had where he's just dragging defenders on. Now, he did fumble the ball earlier on in the game, but where he's dragging defenders, I could see Jay Harris as that running back when you get inside the goal line, when you get to a 3rd and 1 type of package and you sub off Makhi Hughes, who's been on the field for 4 plays, for 5 plays, for 6 plays. Same with Noah Whittington. I think Jay Harris can really serve as that power back, short yardage back when you need those types of yardages. 22 can check into the game, and he can get you those types of yards. I'm not expecting Jaden Lamar or Jay Harris to rush for 400 yards this next season, 500 yards this next season. Could it happen? Yeah, it could probably happen. But I think the situational depth with certain spots for each and every one of those guys will really be on display this season, as opposed to the consistent depth. When you look at the consistency, they're going to lean on the experience. They're going to lean on Makhi Hughes, who's entering his third year of college football. They're going to lean on Noah Whittington, who has been through this program, who's the dad, literally, within this Oregon running back room. And, he certainly has seen a lot of defenses throughout his day as well. Dink is somebody I think that's sitting there that I think has the full, complete ability to break into a more consistent role in this Oregon team. Will he? I think that remains to be seen. But man, either way, I am so psyched about the depth in this running back room. I'm so pumped to be wrong that one of those guys did not transfer out. I think if you see injuries in this room, there are many players within this room I think that can step up into bigger roles. And the drop-off from Makhi Hughes, is Jaden Lamar going to be able to run the ball as consistently as Makhi Hughes? No, I don't believe that. But I think that in certain situations, each and every single one of these guys can come up and certainly make a big play in the run game. With spring practice behind us and the spring transfer portal closed, we know what this roster is going to look like in 2025. And now that we kind of know that, now I think we're starting to take this to the next level. Okay, we know what the roster is going to look like. We know what the schedule is going to look like. And now people, I think, are starting to look forward towards expectations. What can we expect from this Oregon team in 2025? And what can be deemed as a successful 2025 is what I'm going to try to tackle here in this segment. Now, I do have something at the end of the segment that I believe is success and what I deem as success. What do you think is success? Certainly leave that in the comments below, because I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of different ways to look at success. Now, I think when you take a look at what a successful 2025 can do, you gotta look back at 2024. Now, the Rose Bowl is a giant black eye. New Year's Day, 41-21, down 34-0. Like, we all know the story. We don't want to talk about it very often, but there's no doubt that's what a lot of people I think are drawn to when they really think about the 2024 season. It was the last thing. It's recency bias, right? But make no mistake about it. The 2024 season was a very successful season for Duck football. Going 13-0 to start this thing off in the year 2024, the calendar year 2024. Beating Ohio State during the regular season at Autzen was a fantastic moment in the history of Oregon football, maybe. Beating Penn State in Indianapolis to win the Big Ten championship. Dominating some of these teams the way they dominated them. I think one thing that really flies under the radar from 2024 is just the way they thrashed Illinois. Illinois was a good team. This ended up being a 10-win football team. And the way Illinois the way Oregon, I should say, said to Illinois, says, yeah, this one's over midway through the second quarter, I think in hindsight is very impressive. But 2024 was a very successful season. So I think you need to look at that year to really set the bar for 2025, because you have to look at what was successful in 2024 and you have to determine, can this team have a higher ceiling in 25 than what the team accomplished in 2024? And I think there's certainly different levels to success. So maybe did 2024 achieve the high-end level of success? Maybe 2025 doesn't accomplish quite what they did, but they can still be successful, maybe on a little bit of a lower end. Let's try to break this thing down a little bit more, why don't we? Now, the big differences, here's kind of how I break down these two teams. 2024 had experience. You had the most experienced quarterback in college football history, for God's sakes, in Dylan Gabriel. He'd seen a lot of football. You had a guy like Josh Connerly at tackle. You had Jordan James that had been in the program for years. You had Terrence Ferguson that had been in the program for years. You had Tez Johnson, that had been in the program. Now that was his second season. Jabbar Muhammad played a lot of football. Jordan Birch played a lot of football. Jeffrey Bassa played a lot of football. Like, you look around at this Oregon roster this season, and I think having that experience, having those seasons under their belt, helped this team progress the way they did through the regular season. You don't really have that. For the first time in the Dan Lanning era, you have a quarterback that is not ultra experienced. Bo Nix had 3 years of experience under his belt before he transferred in. Dylan Gabriel had a whole bunch of experience, right? Those were the two most experienced quarterbacks during their time over there at Oregon. Of Dylan Gabriel breaking the Bo Nix record of most snaps, games, starts, whatever it was. I can't exactly remember what that record ended up being. But I think the difference with this year's team is you have the youth, you have the inexperience. Dante Moore is just one piece of it. The secondary is another piece of it. Even the wide receiver position, bringing in somebody like a Decorian Moore, and then whoever the wide receiver 3 is going to be. The offensive line, okay, you have guys that I think have maybe played in other spots, but they have inexperience as far as their Oregon experience. Is how are they going to gel together? I think there's a lot more questions at this point in time, but to be honest with you, I think there's more talent. I think there can be more talent. I think, like, and I've said this before, that there could be a higher ceiling with some of this talent at Oregon because this young talent needs to get games under their belt. They need to get experience. So at the end of the season, I think that this team can certainly be finishing strong. I think this schedule shapes up for, at the very least, a 10-win season. And make no mistake about it, when you're setting the floor, I think when you're setting the minimum for this team, 10 wins, and when you talk about being successful, 10 wins and a playoff appearance is the floor of success for this Oregon Ducks football team. I think one thing that I think people are going to have into the back of their minds is, well, Dan has had incremental growth every single season. From 10 wins to 12 wins to 13 wins to not being able to win against your rivals to being able to win against your rivals. So where does the incremental growth really come in to provide a successful 2025 for this Ducks team this year? I think for me, it's the postseason, because I don't think this team's going to go 13-0 again. I just don't. And I think there's a sick, twisted part of me down in the inside that's kind of saying this Oregon team could maybe benefit from being on the short end of the stick in one of these games and learning from that and developing from that. And working toward, like, look at Ohio State, how they were motivated at the end of the season after that loss to the Michigan Wolverines. And that certainly turned into a pretty damn successful season for the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think Dan's incremental growth maybe shows the signs of what success could be. For me, I think it's pretty clear. If you want to continue to kind of take steps up on that ladder, I think a successful season would be a playoff win of some kind. Whether it's in the first round of the playoffs you win and then you lose in the quarterfinals again, I think that could still be a successful season. Even though you're kind of sitting in the same spot as you did last season, I think that could still be considered a successful season. If you get a first round bye and you get to the quarterfinals, and you win a playoff game there and you get to the semifinals, which is one round further than you did last year, I certainly deem that as a successful season. I think that this is a team that's pushing towards 2026. I really believe that. I think that this is the year to kind of set the stage for a true national championship type of football team to return a lot of guys in 2026. The youth, the inexperience, there's a lot of questions. When you see this much inexperience on a team, you're asking a lot for everything to click. And I think what we've seen in previous years, everything needs to click, especially at the right time. I'm just not sure. Oregon, they could be that type of team, But I'm too unsure right now if that's that type of football team. This is a team that needs to win 10 games. I think this is a team that needs to win that playoff game to kind of take that next step, to prove that they can take that next step as a program, to really set the stage for what could be the ultimate successful season in 2026 for this Oregon Ducks football program. Another great edition of TSOW is in the books. I want to thank everybody for watching it. I want to thank everybody for listening. Now, we got a handful of months to go here in the summer until we get to fall camp, when we can start really focusing in on football really again and what this roster is going to look like. It's going to probably need some inspiration. So if you want to drop that in the comments below, what you want to hear from that show out west, please let me know in the comments, on Twitter as well. You know where to find me, email, all that sort of stuff. That showoutwest@gmail.com. So please let me know so we can kind of get you involved a little bit in this show as well. But until next time, I'm Ted LaBrue. We will see you in the next edition of That Show Out West.